Following his triumph over King Deriades and the armies of India, Dionysus reveled in the magnitude of his victory. Though the battle had been arduous, the god's divine might and the unwavering devotion of his followers had secured their triumph. Strolling across the battlefield, now entwined with vines nourished by the blood of the fallen, he reflected on both the joy of conquest and the weight of the sacrifices made. To honor the warriors of both sides, he commanded that a grand funeral be held. Under the glow of a full moon, towering bonfires were kindled, and altars were adorned with cascading vines, fresh flowers, and goblets brimming with wine. The bodies of the fallen were respectfully prepared, their brows crowned with ivy wreaths and golden leaves. During the solemn ceremony, Dionysus intoned sacred hymns, invoking the gods to welcome the souls of the departed. As an offering, he poured wine onto the earth, dedicating the libation to those who had perished in battle. Encircling the flames, the bacchants, satyrs, and nymphs swayed and sang, their voices interwoven with the sounds of divine celebration. Even the human warriors, touched by the god's presence, surrendered to the intoxicating energy of the ritual. Though it was a moment of farewell, it was also a time for remembrance and reverence, an affirmation of life through death. As the ceremony concluded, the warriors' ashes were scattered across the fields, enriching the land with their essence. With the memory of their fallen and the transformative spirit of his cult as his guiding force, Dionysus led his army forward once more. The return to Greece became a procession of triumph. Bacchants, satyrs, nymphs, and mortals marched together in a vibrant celebration, their every step imbued with the pulse of joy. The air resonated with the rhythms of flutes and the steady beat of drums, each note echoing their god's victory. As they crossed through distant lands, Dionysus's divine energy left its mark. Vines sprouted effortlessly in his wake, and as word of his conquest spread, villages along the way gathered to greet him. Enthralled by the intoxicating presence of the god and the promise of liberation, many abandoned their old lives and joined the procession, eager to embrace the ecstasy of his cult. Through mountains and across rivers, the journey pressed on. Omens of new challenges emerged along the way, yet Dionysus remained steadfast, knowing that his path would not only cement his divine status, but usher in a new age for those who embraced his way. With every step, the shores of Greece drew nearer, promising a welcome fit for both mortals and gods. One tranquil night during his journey, a vision unlike any other gripped his dreams. In it, a woman of unparalleled beauty appeared before him, her hair flowing like silk upon the wind, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of tenderness and quiet strength. The name Ariadne resonated within him like a celestial melody, as if the very fabric of destiny had whispered it into his soul. Standing before him in the dream, she extended her hands, and at that moment, Dionysus felt an unbreakable bond tethered between them. The connection was undeniable. When he awoke, certainty filled his heart. Ariadne had been fated to him, a companion destined to share his triumphs, to complete his essence, and to stand beside him for eternity. Determined to find her, Dionysus pressed onward, knowing their paths would soon entwine. Unbeknownst to her, fate was already shifting in Ariadne's favor. Left stranded on the island of Naxos by the Athenian hero Theseus, she awaited an uncertain future. Theseus, haunted by a vision of Dionysus, had been compelled to abandon her. In the divine dream, the god had appeared, radiant with celestial authority, claiming Ariadne as his own. Overcome with fear, Theseus dared not defy the will of the gods. Without a single glance backward, he departed, leaving Ariadne behind so that destiny could unfold as the heavens had decreed. Dionysus discovered Ariadne seated along the shore, her gaze lost upon the distant horizon. The sorrow etched into her features weighed heavy upon the air itself, suffusing the island with an atmosphere of longing and despair. Softly he approached, his steps barely disturbing the sand beneath him. When Ariadne's eyes lifted to meet his, she beheld more than just a stranger. Before her stood a divine presence, radiating warmth, comfort, and an inexplicable familiarity. Extending his hand, Dionysus spoke. Slowly, she allowed herself to believe in the god before her. Dionysus shared his dream, the vision that had led him to her. With gentle conviction, he vowed that as long as she walked by his side, loneliness and sorrow would never touch her again. Their union marked a turning point. By Dionysus's decree, Ariadne was gifted immortality, ascending beyond her mortal bounds to become his eternal companion. In a final act of devotion, he lifted the crown she had worn during their wedding and cast it into the heavens, where it became a constellation of glittering stars, a symbol of their everlasting love. The celebration of their marriage transcended realms. Mortals and immortals alike gathered in revelry, their voices raised in song and joy. Wine flowed endlessly, laughter echoed through the heavens, and the rhythm of the dance was ceaseless. With their union, Dionysus's place among the Olympians was solidified, not merely as a god of revelry, but as one who possessed the power to transmute suffering into joy, mortality into eternity, and solitude into love. Upon his long-awaited return to Greek lands, Dionysus was met with jubilation. Everywhere he traveled, mortals celebrated his triumphs, marveling at his conquest of India and his union with Ariadne. His presence inspired admiration among both gods and men, as altars rose in his honor, and his grand processions transformed into annual festivals filled with dance, theater, and above all, the flowing of wine. On Olympus, his arrival was marked by a formal acknowledgement of his divine status. Before the assembled gods, Zeus, his father, declared,
"Dionysus, my son, you have demonstrated both strength and wisdom. Your victories extend beyond distant lands. You have won over hearts and souls alike. Today, you shall claim your rightful place among the immortals of this pantheon."
The gods voiced unanimous approval. Even Hera, despite her past resistance, reluctantly conceded to his ascension. Dionysus's cult, embodying both revelry and transformation, became an integral aspect of Greek religious life, symbolizing the eternal balance between chaos and order, suffering and joy. With remarkable speed, his worship spread across Greece, fueled by the inclusive and transformative nature of his rites. Dionysian festivals grew into major cultural and religious events, cementing his influence throughout the land. The rural Dionysia, held in small villages, celebrated the bounty of the vineyards and the joys of the harvest. Meanwhile, the urban Dionysia, particularly in cities like Athens, took on a grander scale, featuring elaborate processions and theatrical performances in his honor. Among the most significant expressions of his worship was the birth of theater, which flourished under his divine patronage. Tragedies and comedies were performed during his festivals, reflecting the essence of Dionysus as a deity of both ecstasy and sorrow. Wine, revered as a sacred gift, flowed abundantly, binding participants in a shared experience of transcendence and communion. At the heart of his rituals stood the bacchants, women devoted to his cult. Their frenzied dances carried them into a trance-like state, channeling Dionysian energy as they sought to transcend the boundaries of the mundane and enter direct communion with the divine. Symbolic sacrifices, alongside offerings of wine and earth's fruits, reaffirmed the god's deep connection to nature and its eternal cycles of life, death, and renewal. As the centuries passed, the worship of Dionysus extended far beyond Greece, leaving an indelible mark on other cultures and belief systems. When his cult reached Rome, the god merged with Bacchus, retaining his core attributes of ecstasy, transformation, and liberation, The festivals dedicated to him, Bacchanalia, became infamous for their uninhibited revelry, blending mysticism with pleasure. Initially held in secret, these rites took on an air of mystery, shrouded in both allure and controversy. The Bacchanalia, characterized by ecstatic dances, intoxicating wine rituals, and visionary experiences, drew both fervent followers and wary detractors. Some viewed these ceremonies as a challenge to the social order, and their unrestrained nature eventually provoked a decisive reaction from the Roman authorities. In 186 BC, the Senate passed the infamous Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, imposing strict regulations on Bacchic celebrations. Despite these restrictions, the cult of Bacchus persisted, evolving to fit Roman traditions while ensuring that the spirit of Dionysus endured across time. Beyond public revelry, Dionysus took on an even deeper spiritual dimension in Orphism, a religious and philosophical movement in ancient Greece that emphasized purification of the soul and the pursuit of divine unity. Within this tradition, Dionysus was often equated with Zagreus, embodying the cyclical process of death and rebirth essential for spiritual transcendence. Orphic mythology recounted the tragic tale of Zagreus, torn apart by the Titans and ultimately reborn as Dionysus. This narrative became a profound allegory for the soul's journey, fragmented by earthly existence yet destined to reunite with the divine. For Orphic initiates, Dionysus was not merely a god of wine and ecstasy, he was a sacred guide, offering the promise of renewal and salvation. Through Orphic hymns, his mysteries were exalted, and ritual initiations sought to mirror his divine experiences. Devotees believed that through these sacred rites, the soul could undergo purification, breaking free from the confines of the material world and achieving a direct, transformative connection with the divine. In this way, Dionysus transcended his role as a deity of earthly revelry. He became a profound symbol of spiritual metamorphosis, weaving together sorrow and joy, mortality and immortality, destruction and rebirth. His myth and worship united the human with the divine, shaping a legacy that endured far beyond the festivals that bore his name.